From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, a show about Star Wars, pop culture, and the ultimate adventure, life itself. I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
I'm Ken Napzok, and you're here for our very special ongoing series that started as kind of a lark, and it's continued to be a lark, which is why it's still here. Subjective Wars, where we take two things in Star Wars, throw them in the ring together, but we don't really fight to the death. We have a nice conversation about our subjective opinions, thoughts, and feelings. And maybe fears today.
Yes, and the thing that usually dies the most is our feelings, because we become sad that we can't choose both as the winners. But it is the beginning of spooky season. October has officially begun. And so we thought we'd do something a little bit spooky themed, a little bit Halloween themed. So we're going to have a very tentacular episode of Subjective Wars, where we pit two Star Wars monsters against one another to win our hearts. And those two tentacle-filled monsters are the Sarlaac versus Rathtar. I'm very excited for this because they are both creepy. Ken, let's just start with a baseline on tentacles. How do you feel about tentacles in general in pop culture, on real life beasts? Do you feel like they are overdone? Has tentacles a moment in the spotlight? Is there 15 minutes over? Where are you at?
Personal mileage may vary. If tentacles are on a creature, I'm immediately 10% more freaked out. And maybe even 20% more disgusted. I don't mind cute little creatures of the sea. I'm fascinated by octopuses from afar, but I kind of don't like watching them. And there was one time I went to a meal, as an adult, 5-6 years ago. It was, plate of goodness showed up, an Asian restaurant, and someone was like, "Oh, this is my favorite," and it was like chopped up octopus tentacle. I didn't eat the rest of the meal. It's just something about the tentacles. I don't know what it is. It's I can't. So they freak me out.
Is it the suckers that are often found on tentacles, or is it the length? Is it the idea that the creature can get you from far away from its body mass?
I think that might have more to do with it. The tentacles actually seem that thing I'm doing is actually from Roxanne. Steve Martin does it when he falls out of the tree and scares the old ladies, and so that's been in my pop culture brain for a long time. That's funny, but what you're talking about, anytime I see them used. Sarlaac is an example. Rathtar's, Lord of the Rings, the lake creature that right before Durin in front of Durin's Gate. Tentacles are always reaching far beyond what they should be allowed to reach to pull you back in. And I don't like it. It's like my sense of trust in the moment. I've gotten away. Oh no, I haven't. So that's a fear too, maybe.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the primal tentacle fear is that kind of combination of almost like, what if there's something under the bed and it grabs your ankle? There's that kind of like, something small and unseen can grab you. And then the additional horror of, and it's grabbing you from 4 blocks away and attached to something 10 million times worse than the tentacle itself. And you don't even know what that is or can't even see what that is. I think that it represents that little small fear of a little ticklish thing coming at you from somewhere and then being attached to something much more horrible farther away.
I like that. Ooh, a tickle? Oh, no. Oh, no. You've spent a lot of time in the H.P. Lovecraft world where tentacles just seem to be a key component of any villain.
It's a big part. Tentacular that's a Lovecraft word for sure. Yeah. Also just a great way to describe a block party and see if anybody notices. What? It's what?
No.
It's a tentacular party. What? All right. So let's also start with we got our tentacles baseline. We always start with the baseline of the actual creatures, the actual combatants here. You were mixed on the Rathtars, right? So do you start with a bias, a little bit of you grew up with the Sarlaac, weren't sure about the Rathtar? Is that where you're at?
Nearly 10 years on from Force Awakens, I want to approach the Rathtars with an open maw. Tentacles out for a hug. Yeah, longtime ForceCenter fans will listen. I was rather grumpy of the Rathtar sequence, only because I just didn't. I didn't know if I was on board for the design. It had some of my favorite Han Solo moments that gave way to some of my least favorite Force Awakens kind of action sequences. But that's 2015, Ken. 2024 Ken doesn't even remember some of the things he had a problem with. And it does help that in that Darth Maul comic, that a 5-issue run, this is where Maul, right before Phantom Menace, he makes his first kill of a Jedi, that whole sequence. He goes like Rathtar hunting, or he jumps in on some Rathtar hunters. And it was a great effective sequence. And I do in the end, once I got past the fact that Rathars to me looked like Mad Balls, which was the thing from the 80s, little toy that you could get, I was okay with it. It's just that the Sarlaac has decades for us, original Trilogy kids, decades of connection. It's not my favorite, but I reenacted that sequence on my playground at school so many times that I kind of love the Sarlaac, mouth or not, beak or not. But I'm trying to put that aside. So all that to say, and I'll kick it back to you, I'm trying to own my bias against the Rathtar so I can have a fair fight here today.
Yeah. I don't think I have a bias, and that's terrible. Because it's going to make it harder for me to decide, and sadder when I do. I love the Sarlaac since I was a kid, and yes, there's that deep primal connection. One of my favorite Star Wars moments will always be Luke, jumping and pulling on the plank and doing the flip, and all that is tied to the Sarlaac. Getting older and you just see things as a kid and you just accept them. Like, cool, right? There was a mouth in the desert with tentacles, and they were gonna throw Luke in there. And then you get older and you realize that's wild that they made that up. And you get even older and you to realize like how much that's like, let's take genres we love and mash them together. Let's take the almost H.P. Lovecraft like monstrosity, not quite the cosmic horror level, but that kind of beast, more of a bonkers kaiju, and mash it up with this sort of pirate walk the plank thing. Yeah. So the Sarlaac, there's a lot tied up with its history, with Luke, with Boba Fett, with its special edition beak, but it has just lived in my imagination. Like the Sarlaac itself is up there with quicksand and bottomless pits of adventure fantasy of my youth.
Yes.
But then on the other hand, I loved the Rathars when they came out, because I think they did tap into a Sarlaac similar to the Sarlaac, a little bit more of that kaiju, a little bit more of that cosmic beast. And I also just kind of feel like, things get designed in Star Wars for lots of different reasons. And Rathars are one of those ones that, for me, the Rathtar designers understood the assignment. The Rathars, for me, were designed for that sequence of the concept is Han is carrying something real awful and it's going to get loose. And a lesser design could have been something like the Nexu again from the prequels, or something a little bit more that sort of it's got recognizable limbs. This idea that it's just a ball of tentacles, teeth, and hate is really inventive, and it really sells that. Han's in a bad way. He's making bad decisions. His life is out of control. Even the implication that he lost a bunch of crew, even getting them on board, and probably isn't even going to make his money back. The design of the Rathars, whether it's whether it's effective or not, whether it's too similar to Men in Black, which I think was the comparison at the time, to me, a ball of tentacles, teeth, eyes, and hate shows narratively exactly what we needed to know about where Han was at. So it's just kind of for me, a chef's kiss of the narrative drives the design.
Yeah, look, it's uncontrolled chaos that he's got behind a wall, right? It's kind of how we meet him. I love that now. And I think I definitely was one who said, I don't know, it's a Men in Black kind of sequence there. But one of the big things that has changed in me as a Star Wars fan from 2014, 2015 to now, I was never a complete dark and gritty type Star Wars fan, but it is a fun, wild pulp segment of a very pulpy movie, right? And it has all those earmarks of just wild space fantasy that doesn't have to be my favorite sequence. It doesn't need to be, right? Nothing needs to be the favorite, but I can look at it exactly what you're talking about. The Han's loss of purpose is in the Rathtar's mouth.
If we think that's what the Rathars represent, to you, what does the Sarlaac represent?
I think you're gathered around a circle of danger. you're and it's buried, and I think you got to watch your step, and I think that's got the genius that there's so much wonderful tension in that opening sequence from and we've talked about this on the channel before, but the idea that the Jabba's palace sequence is almost a short film before Return of the Jedi. Whether I agree with that 100% or not doesn't matter. I think it has that vibe, and from the moment 3PO and R2 knock on the door to the end there, it is the buried tension. So the fact that this mobster's got a mouth in the desert that he dangles you over, it makes perfect sense. And just as a kid, like I said, it was just the best sequence for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it does have those ties, like we're talking about. Other people have said a million times to the walk of the plank pirate stuff. But there's also just something about like, yeah, the gangster connection. Like the Sarlaac is in some way is like concrete shoes. It's sleeping with the fishes. It's when I was trying to like picture like what does it represent to me, I saw on my computer the trash bin. It's like,
yeah,
this is where Jabba goes to just go like, you're nothing. I don't need you. I'm dragging you from the desktop into the trash of existence. It's like, you're nothing. And I think that's also kind of narratively the argument that's going on is like, Jabba's like, this kid's not a Jedi. He's got a few tricks up his sleeve, but I knew real Jedi. Like, you're nothing. You don't have real power. And then Luke's like, surprise, MFer.
Yeah.
I have real power. You thought you could drag me, into the trash.
Yep.
Nope.
Yeah, it's definitely mobster, but not like Scorsese, casino mobster. It's more like Dick Tracy mobster. it's Who Framed Roger Rabbit mobster. It would put you in the concrete, gonna squish you. Yeah, which is what I like. I like about that so much. And yeah, we can talk a little bit about. I do have the beak in the special edition at the time. Probably not one of my favorite things, but visually. I'm okay with it. I've come to a place of peace with that, as I have with a lot of the special edition stuff, particularly Return of the Jedi. Again, doesn't have to be my favorite thing, what they did with that, but I still think the sequence works.
Yeah, I think as we've talked about it before, some of the actual CGI technology of the beak may start to be looking a little dated, but I like the beak, and I certainly understand why Lucas wanted to add it because the open mouth sort of just screaming at all times, and also to me it really does have we are limited in production because just the design makes a lot more sense of like, great, there's a beast that's so massive and it's buried under the ground. It makes the beast a little scarier when the beast doesn't get to choose who or what it eats. Because there is also this sort of like very pulpy, like it's an offering from Jabba to this mighty Sarlaac.
Yeah.
That's maybe to be
Temple
revered.
Yeah.
And if it turns into just like I tripped and I fell into the open mouth and the Sarlaac didn't even want me.
Yeah.
It makes the beast feel a little scarier if it's just sort of like, I'm not even going to make any comparisons, but like an open hole with no choices is upsetting.
I spent some time
multiple levels.
On multiple. I spent some time as a kid wondering. First of all, I think the tentacles are doing the heavy lifting there, right? Reaching out to grab you.
That's true. The tentacles are making choices.
Tentacles are making choices, but still, it's always just I've enjoyed especially if you go to like Galaxy's Edge and they have that like Sarlaac on display, the little one. I love the cutaways down below. I love the cross sections of the Sarlaac down below. But I always as a kid I thought, do just herds of banthas like fall into it? Like how does this thing, does it move around? And this is information that maybe could become available later on. But as a kid in 83, 84, I was wondering what you were saying too. Like it's just sitting there. It's got to rely on Jabba.
Yeah, I mean, like in the original cut, I believe Boba Fett just rolls right in, right? There's no help from tentacles. I
can't remember. Yeah,
I don't feel like my memory of it. I'll have to pull it up, but my memory of it is that the Sarlacc's not getting a lot of choice in that. So the Rathars have been expanded, as you talked about. We got to see them in Darth Maul. They were featured in high stakes moments from the first phase of the High Republic. I'm sure scrolling through Wikipedia, I'd find even more references, involvement.
I am now. Yes.
We're talking about these things as scary monsters for spooky season. At this point, which one is more frightening to you? If you met it in a dark alley, it doesn't quite work for the Sarlaac. But like, if you can imagine encountering one of these things in the real world, like let's say you're on a hike in like
Mm-hmm.
Griffith Park, and it's you're
Mm-hmm.
going through like a forested area,
Mm-hmm.
and a clearing opened up, and either there's a giant beak, mouth, and tentacles in the ground, or two Rathars come rolling out of the woods at you.
Yeah.
Which one is more terrifying to you?
I think you're talking about the Griffith Park Sarlaac, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I think Rathtars. This almost comes down to coyote versus snake on a hike, and I'm going to be more terrified of the snake every time. I don't know why. I don't know why I feel I can pet the coyote, but I feel like I could try. Uh,
Mm.
I think I think I'd rather, if this is a what would you rather face? I think I'd rather face the Rathtar. There's
Mm.
something about the 1,000-year death, so to speak, of the Sarlaac. Now that and that opening sequence of the Book of Boba Fett is disturbing to me. Like I didn't want to see
Mhm.
that. I knew that might happen, down to the Patton Oswalt of it all. Like, oh, they might start in the Sarlacc. It's just too much for me to take. And then some of the video games, I think Star Wars
Mm.
Unleashed, canon or not, doesn't matter. Where you go down into one and there's a bunch of air being breathed, and you got it's too much for me. I'd rather run from the Rathtar or face my fate. I think.
Mhm. See, we always learn a lot about ourselves when we have to ask honestly, what are we afraid of and why?
Yep. Yep.
And I think I'm far, far more afraid of the Rathtars. I think part of it is the speed. I feel like
Yeah.
if they just came rolling at me, my options would be very limited. Maybe I could get up a tree high enough, but
Yeah. Botanicals.
maybe I could run into deep trees. But like, I feel like Rathtars can squeeze.
Yeah. Yeah. They have
You
that.
know?
I would imagine they got a little bit of octopus power. We're like, how did it fit in there? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't sense a lot of skeletal structure there. I feel like Rathtars would maybe be like, did it just squeeze between those trees and like break a bunch of teeth and pop off 3 eyes out of its head in order to
Yeah.
get me? Like
Get
it
through.
probably would. I
Yep.
Everything about this Sarlacc is, of course, horrific. The idea of coming across it, and before you know it, a tentacle's wrapped around your leg, and it's dragging you, and you're holding on to a tree branch that you know is going to break, and
Mm.
all that. And even being digested for 1,000 years in utter agony, the first thought that my mind goes to is like, well, does my phone still work for a while?
Yeah. Do you have?
Could I watch things? Could I think about
Could
stories?
you
Like,
watch things?
could I
I'm-
daydream a bit in agony? Like, a Rathtar's just gonna like eviscerate you
You got it.
immediately, right?
It's it. It's done.
And
You're a
there's
shoe.
that. Maybe if it does really like preserve you enough to slowly eat you over 1,000 years, there's hope. And this is my psychology of like the worst possible scenario. I always want to have like just give me a tiny shred of hope and I can get by.
Yeah, well, look, it's a lesson of Star Wars. You're saying that Star Wars has taught us that you might be able to survive the Sarlacc with a little bit of hope. That's that's what I'm picking up. But yeah, and then I 1,000-year digestion. That's a slow pace. I don't think I'm going to be around for 1,000 years unless it does some weird necromancy to keep me alive or something. But like, what goes first? Can you get out of there with a loss of a hand? Is it like a hiker getting stuck in the wilderness and gnaws off his own hand to survive? Can you get out of there? Can he climb back up? Now, the thing is, the beak we saw in Book of Boba Fett, which, by the way, was a great expansion of my fear of Sarlaccs and my, I think maybe like the beak more. It seems like the beak is a front door both ways. Where I would think that years ago you could just climb out of the open maw, which as you and I saw as kids, if you hit the teeth hard, they shake.
Yeah.
Speaking of production, but I wonder if that beak keeps you back in. You got to know the code to get out. I don't know if that's good.
Oh yeah, right. If the beak would toy with you and let you climb part of the way out, and then be like, "Nope, gotcha."
You gotta
and
kill that beak.
Yeah, before people pointed out, like Boba Fett's got some of the toughest armor in the galaxy, and he's already turned into slime. So maybe Jabba's just wrong or lying. Maybe Jabba's this whole we hear that from 3PO, right? They digested over 1,000 years. Maybe 3PO translated wrong. It was digested over 1,000 seconds.
You bring up a good point of the lore of the Sarlacc. It's through the eyes of untrusty narrator, I would think, who's trying to instill fear in you. Like, either you get you, I get my way as Jabba, or you die slowly over 1,000 years, and you don't want that, right? You don't want that because the Rancor is just like I'm pissed or bored, so it's entertainment. The Sarlaac is, like you said, it's gangster.
Yeah. I was trying to scan Wikipedia to see if it had more information about the digestion, and I just got distracted by this sentence about how they actually function. That Sarlaac were found on Felucia, Pisana, Tatooine, Vodran, Vortia Prime, and begin their lives as spores and were able to travel great distances. When a male and female encountered one another, the smaller male would parasitically feed off the female, diminishing her size while increasing his own. Once the male reached the female's original size, he would burst, releasing millions of spores into the air and atmosphere.
Star Wars is weird, man.
Yep. Oh, and Wikipedia doesn't believe Jabba either. It says, according to the Jabba the Hutt, prey were allegedly digested for millennia.
Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. We've since 1983, folks like you and me have believed that as a fact. I think we needed to question Jabba more.
Yeah, we need to question Jabba a lot more.
A lot.
None of that.
Yep.
None of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you were more afraid of the Sarlaac, correct? In real life?
No. Yeah. Well. Yeah. I think I would have the dumb belief that I could escape the Rathtar. It's a dumb belief. Okay. I'd be a shoe. I'd be a hiking shoe left on the trail. But the Sarlaac, it's the thought of maybe I could get out, maybe I could escape. But it's in a space fantasy version of being buried alive, and I don't like that.
Yeah, that's what I was searching for, because I know I have the good and bad trait of there's always hope, which has helped me and hindered me quite badly at times too. When they're like, you're wrong, actually, there is no hope. But you do not like to be contained. Like that is an essential. Like, I mean,
both in schedule wise or just MRI wise.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've seen you in small rooms, and you know, it does things to you, right? You know, I can understand how that would be. Eat me quick, but don't digest me for a million years.
Yeah. If I'm gonna go, let's do this. Let's dance. But yeah. No, indeed.
Yeah. Well, let's look at them in terms of their. We've looked at them from their original introduction, their terror factor in the real world. How do you think they both relate to sort of the larger lore of Star Wars? Is the older things always have a bonus to hit because you have years and years of stories of them, and the newer things always have resistance until more time passes? That's just natural.
The way it works.
But do you think the Rathtars in the Sarlaac will end up 10, 15 years from now in that same sort of the same level of importance to Star Wars lore, or do you think the Sarlaac will always be bigger and better to people than the Rathtar?
I think it will be bigger. Better is always going to be subjective, the name of our show. I think there's a 10-year-old in 2015 that probably has a different view of the Rathars than I do. That's the way it should be. But Sarlaac will always remain big. It's just such a big sequence, right? It's such a thing. You cut to it, you got the skiffs going around, and it's not just one thing, it's 15 things going on. The Rathtar sequence, they'd have to show up again in a show or something. The books, the High Republic books, great use of them in that comic. Like I said, I love them in that comic with Darth Maul. The sequence, because it's I don't want to say over the top, slightly campy, definitely pulpy. It has all the things you talked about. I think it's still, even just in terms of time, it's a smaller sequence.
Yeah,
it happens. It starts. It's kind of over. You got the Falcon takes off. I love that visual, the Falcon taking off with one on its cockpit and blowing off. That's all good. But I think the Sarlaac is just featured more prominently. Again, it's almost like a short film before Return of the Jedi.
No, I agree. And it would be powerful if it was just in Return of the Jedi, but with the Book of Boba Fett relatively recently. Revisiting it and the destruction of it. Yeah, and I think the Rathtars do have the challenge of, we've talked a lot recently about how hard The Force Awakens sold the back to practical filmmaking. Look at Bubba Joe, bopping along. And the Rathtars are not practical filmmaking, right? They're very CGI, which I think is
Yeah.
why people really related them to like Men in Black.
A movie I love, by the way, but I was one of
Yeah.
the ones that did it. But yeah, that was that was a 1996 movie, and I think you're right. I think looking back, I don't think I would have thought of this directly while sitting in my seat, but yeah, they had promised a lot of things. Understandably, I got it. I got what the narrative coming out of the prequels was in terms of just some of the CGI of it all. So I got why they leaned into that. But yeah, it almost was like, whoa, wait a minute, I've been sold a bill of goods here. That is clearly a cartoon monster. And that didn't help me. That's a personal experience. That again, over time, I can't even remember some of the things I said back then, but
Yeah.
could be part of it.
Yeah, I think over time, I think for me and perhaps our generation in general, the Sarlaac is always going to be hard to overcome because, we grew up with it as a playground fantasy,
Yeah.
literally.
Literally.
But the Rathars, I think, have a great point in that they have filled this little pocket of Star Wars monster in a great way. I was looking at the Wikipedia page, and a lot of their canon appearances have been about like they are one of the most dangerous game. This idea of like an unhuntable beast that just lives to do nothing. It's a predator that does nothing but rolls around and eats. Is like we have the sort of the arena beasts who are all feral and dangerous in Attack the Clones, and we have many beasts who end up being like, well, they're only attacking you because you disturbed them, or they're protecting their young, or all that.
Yeah,
the Rathars become this interesting thing that are like, well, maybe there's no amount of the greatest Force user who reaches out and makes connections, like the greatest Purgle talker, right? Anakin seems to soothe the Nexu, right? The greatest Force using animal talker would reach out to the Rathtar, and it would just be like, eat. And there's, I mean, we talk about from sort of like a moral perspective in Star Wars a lot, that there's no such thing as just born bad, but we're talking about a feral animal, and like, does this animal just not have it in its makeup? The Rathtar doesn't have a calm side. Is it kind of the Rathars, like, are they the kind of animals like if they had too much to eat, they would just explode?
I think
no calm, no sense of self-preservation.
Yeah, they are the chihuahuas of space. The creatures were ravenous and persistent eaters, capable of consuming virtually anything that could fit into their robust radial mouths. There's some great descriptions of that. Capable of locomotion, Rathars curled their ambulatory tentacles inward to form a ball and rolled themselves forward in a whirl of whipping tentacles. I mean, this is some great writing here on Wikipedia, because I think you're right. I think they almost can't control themselves. I mean, they're in those cages. That was kind of the thing. Yeah, Han and Chewie lost crew, but they're behind those walls, and they're doing the slapping against the window. They're not stopping. They don't rest. And I think you're right. They would eat until they burst like a balloon.
All right, here's my final question before we make a decision. Would a Sarlaac knowingly choose to eat a Rathtar?
Oh man, this is like one of those nature videos I don't want to watch, but I watch. This hawk picked up this moose. Like, no, I don't. I feel bad for the moose. But I'm watching it. I think the Sarlaac. I don't know if it would win. I don't think the Rathtar would destroy it. I don't think the Rathtar goes down there. What can it eat? It would eat the leftover food, right? It would maybe eat the innards of the Sarlaac. But yeah, I think the Sarlaac has some hubris. I think especially if it's been camped there a while, and people like Jabba are tossing down easy food, meat chunks essentially. And here comes this rolling ball of hate, as you described it, that just wants to devour you. There's a chance they just devour each other, and there's almost like a creature black hole that's created, and quantum mechanics and general relativity collide and explode.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think we're
fascinating. I've asked you the deepest, most personal questions over our years of broadcasting, and that was the one that seemed to give you the most pause.
Because I was picturing it. It's like, how does this even? So if the beak comes out, does the Rathtar then's going to eat the? For podcast listeners, I've got my hands together, right? So the beak goes in the mouth because it can't get around. The beak has always looked tiny,
right? Yeah, can the beak open wider?
So
Yeah, or would
unless
it,
the yeah,
would the
unless the
Sarlacc
beak
choke?
yeah, the Starlight would choke. It's like me and orange chicken, just trying to wedge all of it down too fast. Um, so that might if the beak gets a hold of a tentacle of the Rathtar from behind and it
Hmm.
has can pull it in and chomp its way, then maybe the
Yeah,
Rathtar
maybe there's a
would die.
tentacle fight. Maybe it tries to kind of, like with orange chicken, what you
Yeah.
should do is get it into smaller pieces, right?
Oh, you say that now after 30 years of this.
Where have
Um,
I been?
mm,
Uh, I can't stop picturing it as like a side scroller, where
yes.
the Sarlacc is down here and the Rathtar just comes rolling along and goes boop, falls in, and then like Dig Dug eats its way out of the sack, because I think the Rathtar is going to eat its way out of the sack of the Sarlacc
Ooh,
if it goes in,
if
and the
it goes
Sarlacc
in
will
one
survive.
piece, yeah.
Yeah,
If that beak is like gulp orange chicken down, it could get it. It could eat out and then go through the wall and up, right? Almost like
yeah,
Boba Fett did after it exploded. But boom,
yeah.
chomp. Okay.
But I think this is the greatest horror scene that Star Wars should do, where
Mm.
some characters come across a Sarlacc, a different one, in a strange environment, absolutely terrified of it. They think it couldn't possibly get worse, and suddenly they hear a rumbling, and the Sarlacc spits out a Rathtar that it
Yeah.
failed to eat.
Just that's the Forces of Destiny episode we still need.
Mm-hmm. Did that Sarlacc spit a Rathtar? All right. This has been fun, but we must come to a
Mm-hmm.
conclusion about
Mm-hmm.
our personal subjective favorite. Which is better? Which is scarier? Which adds more to the lore of Star Wars? Are you going old school and sticking to Sarlacc or Rathtar, and why?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with Sarlacc, and as much as I tried to look, I've been nicer. You please tell me if I'm wrong. I've been nicer to the Rathtar than I've been on any other broadcast on Force
Yeah.
Center going back to 2015. I still have to go with the Sarlacc. It's hard. It's hard to shake the generation I'm in, and the decades of spending time with it. But I still think there's such a wonderful mystery to how Sarlaccs work, and you've explained some stuff. I know there's a lot of information out there. Again, Rathtars, it's hard to study. The Wikipedia talks about how they're hard to study. So it's like, I just think Sarlacc is still the standard bearer for dangerous mouths and monsters in Star Wars.
Yeah, I think for myself, like, I think I'm going to gravitate more towards Sarlacc. I'd probably be more excited if, in Skeleton Crew, the kids have to face one. I'd probably be more excited if a Sarlacc showed up than a Rathtar. But I am going to give it to the Rathtar, though, because it is the spooky season, and I want to examine fear. Yeah. And I think that the Sarlacc, I don't know if the Sarlacc itself can be reasoned with. I don't know if you could sit down and have a conversation with it. I don't know if a Force user could get through to it. But we know a little bit more about it. We know it is escapable. We know there is a possibility. And yes, Rathtars are escapable. We saw them in The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
There's something more frightening to me about a monster that has no reason, no possibility, no way of understanding it. It is just rolling out of the dark, wanting to eat you. Even what we're talking about, like the beak represents perhaps being choosy. So maybe, maybe even you can get by a Sarlacc and they don't like you, right? Or maybe there's some secret like spice you can wear that the Sarlacc will be like, that's what will protect you from Sarlaccs. The vibe I get from Rathtars is just like, are you there? I'm gonna eat you. Oops, I'm eating a mannequin. I thought it was a person. I don't know. I'm eating it all. The total lack of logic makes the Rathtars even more frightening to me.
So you're going Rathtars. I'm going Sarlacc, and we'll let the audience decide. There we go. But you're painting to, first of all, 30 years from now, when they do from a certain point of view collection of stories based on The Force Awakens, we will finally get the Rathtar's point of view. It'll be a somber tale of a Rathtar in captivity that just wants to eat. But now you're making me think, I didn't get a chance to read from a certain point of view Return of the Jedi. I wonder if there's a story of a Force-sensitive Sarlacc, much like the Dianoga in the Star Wars New Hope one. So maybe that's, if not, there should be.
I haven't got to it yet either, and I'm sure people will let us know vociferously in the comments if we miss some Sarlaac sentient story. I do look forward to 30 years from now, like, the Stewie, the misunderstood Rathtar, where
Yeah.
we really understand Stewie's feelings and whatnot. Anyway,
Fun.
this has been very fun.
Yeah.
We have so much fun being able to have the fun of pitting two things against each other. It is really fun to do, but also in the spirit of it's a way for us to examine why we like things and compare and contrast. And we'd love
Yeah.
hearing from you about which one you pick and why. So do let us know in the comments. Which one is scarier? Which one is closer to your heart? Hopefully your metaphorical heart, not your physical heart, because you're in trouble if it's close to your physical heart. Ken, you want to take us home?
I do. We're ForceCenter. You can find us on social media at ForceCenter Pod. We're on Blue Sky and Threads, active over there. So find us there. Instagram, Facebook pages, ForceCenter Podcast. YouTube channel. If you're watching here, subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss things like our next live show, which will be a Halloween episode coming up right before Halloween on the 25th of October. So join us there. You can get merch at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter or on YouTube. Go to our Fourth Wall link. Got some shirts there that you might want to grab. You can support us directly at patreon.com/ForceCenter. You can also go to my website if you want to see all the other things I'm doing, stand-up shows, my radio show, Pop Rockin' Radio, all that stuff on there. Joseph, where can they go to find and follow you, sir?
Yeah, you can find me on social media at Joseph Scrimshaw, particularly enjoying Blue Sky and Instagram these days. So find me at those places. Also on Threads as well. You can also visit my website, josephscrimshaw.com, to get updates on all the film stuff I'm doing. Pretty soon here, I'm going to release the film that Ken was in very kindly, The Nightmare Adorable. It's had a great festival run, so I'm going to be releasing that on YouTube and Vimeo relatively soon. And I'm working on a feature film that's called Dead Media. And if you want to help out with making that happen, there is a place called Film North that can collect a one-time tax-deductible donation. Information on that is on my website as well, josephscrimshaw.com. That is it. We have fought the subjective wars.